Wow. Just got back from the Michaela Mayer victory over Sandy Ryan. And as all that was going on and the Xander Zayas was fighting and Bruce Carrington was fighting, Julius Randle gets traded from the Knicks along with Donte DiVincenzo and a draft pick for Karl-Anthony Towns. Wanted to react to it. Haven't done a ton of NBA on the channel as of late. YouTube.com/Bryan Fonseca is the channel. But that's obviously going to change with the NBA coming back around. And there will be more that we learn in the coming days. So I'm doing this the night of the trade breaking and posting it early Saturday. So we'll see. There will be other things transpiring. Obviously, media day is going to come up for these teams. Preseason, the regular season, things of that nature. But here's what we know and what we can sort of look at here. This is a gamble. It's a huge gamble for both sides. Karl-Anthony Towns is this last piece of the Knicks build. This is it. Because for the Knicks, you went and got Mikal Bridges for mad first round picks. And going into last season, before the 2023-2024 season, I had been on all these different shows saying that the Knicks have the most advantageous position in the NBA. They didn't have any max contracts. They still had, 11 first round picks at the time or whatever the case may be. They were just trending upward. They had all these different draft pieces, assets that they can use for a deal and things of that nature. Don't like calling assets, or don't like calling players assets. Draft picks, until they're players, we can get away with that one. And what happened was they started cashing in their chips little by little. You see RJ Barrett, Emmanuel quickly go out the door for OG Anunoby. You see the Bojan Bogdanovic trade, and that gets flipped into something else. Mikal Bridges is in the door. We'll see what happens with Mitchell Robinson. But before we get to that, Mitchell Robinson's hurt. So Julius Randle, you're going to play center. Oh, wait, no. Karl-Anthony Towns, you're going to play center. And now the Knicks don't have as many chips as they had. They cashed them in for the most part. There's still a potential Mitchell Robinson deal. He's making roughly $15 million a year. We'll see what that potentially looks like, what they can get for him. But this is their team. This is it. Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Deuce McBride, Mitchell Robinson, Karl-Anthony Towns, so on and so forth. From the Knicks perspective, if you're looking at this from a basketball standpoint. Now, this doesn't only happen for basketball reasons, but we'll get to that in a second. The Knicks do this because, one, Karl-Anthony Towns, just a better basketball fit than Julius Randle. The spacing is going to be there. Karl-Anthony Towns is not the best big man shooter of all time, as he tried to crown himself, but he is an elite big man shooter, like he is. You're going to have your three-point shooting. He's a much better three-point shooter than Julius Randle. He might be the best three-point shooter on your team right now. We'll see where Deuce McBride is. He quietly becomes one of the most important players in the Eastern Conference now because Donte DiVincenzo leaves and he has to fill in that role. But from a basketball perspective, you lose depth, which is concerning because the Knicks were who they were last year because of their depth. And Isaiah Hartenstein is gone. Mitchell Robinson's hurt again. This is a 2-for-1 deal, so Donte DiVincenzo's gone. And obviously Julius Randle's gone, and now you're going to have to replenish that. Like, Alec Burks left. That's a small thing, but still he left. Like, a lot of different moving parts here. Your top 7, top 8 is still strong, but you take a hit in terms of depth. You're slightly more top heavy than you were before, but you still have damn good closing 5 options. If your closing 5 on many nights is Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, and then Karl-Anthony Towns, yeah, that's going to be competitive with anybody in the Eastern Conference. I don't know if you're beating the Celtics. I don't know if you're beating, even the Sixers. And we'll see what happens with how the Bucks are. Don't know what the Heat are going to look like, the Pacers are going to look like, etc. But you would think that the Knicks would be favored in the playoff series against everyone in the Eastern Conference except for the Boston Celtics. For the Timberwolves, from the basketball standpoint, I don't know. Julius Randle is going to be replacing Karl-Anthony Towns, and that's going to be a clunky fit. Now, Julius Randle's he's a good basketball player. He's a damn good basketball player. He's been All-NBA multiple times. He's been an All-Star multiple times. But even for a small sample size, he's an historically historically bad playoff performer. And that's pretty damning because the Minnesota Timberwolves have championship aspirations. They got to the Western Conference Finals last year. They beat the Denver Nuggets, but lost to the Dallas Mavericks. Julius Randle is not the spacer that Karl-Anthony Towns is. You could say he's a better playmaker, sure. He's an underrated playmaker, I think. It's just when he's willing to do it. He's not as fluid of an offensive player. Needs the ball more. You're trying to develop Anthony Edwards into being that guy. You would say, yeah, he already is, but you get what I'm saying. It's an MVP candidate, someone who can carry your franchise. And Julius Randle is going to be the number 2 to that. And Anthony Edwards isn't yet a knockdown three-point shooter. Like, this is clunky. It's potentially very clunky. It's potentially bad. And Rudy Gobert is still there in his big contract. Speaking of contracts, this is an important piece of this. The Knicks were going to cash in their chips at some point. They just were. Karl-Anthony Towns is the guy they do it on. Why? There are other basketball reasons, but also CAA. Karl-Anthony Towns' representation. And as we know, the Knicks have had their tie-ins with CAA. It's been apparent over the last few years. And this is how a lot of things get done in business. It's relationships. Just is what it is. Like, it just so happens to be a basketball fit, but there's also this piece of it. And his contract is another thing that's a piece of it, because Minnesota evidently didn't want that contract to be on their books any longer while having Rudy Gobert, Anthony Edwards extensions kicking in. And the Knicks could afford to have that contract because Jalen Brunson was taking less and they didn't want to extend Julius Randle. So you have Karl-Anthony Towns. The cap hit for the 2024-2025 season, $49.2 million, $53.1 next year, $57 in 26-27. And when he's 32 years old, in 2027, 2028, that'll be his 13th NBA season. He has a player option for $61 million. It's potentially one of the worst contracts in the NBA. It's a 4-year, $220 million extension for a player we have a lot of questions about. Julius Randle, oh, and this is important, he's extension eligible. Wasn't going to get the extension. Clearly wanted it. Duh. Why would you not? Considering what he's done. Julius Randle effectively put the Knicks back on the map. He did. He's a flawed player. A lot of people don't love his game. There are parts of his game that I love. I told you, the playmaking, the rebounding, just the overall grittiness and toughness, but the shot selection could be less than desirable at times. The poutiness, the lows can be pretty low. He can take himself out of games. He's done it in the playoffs against the Hawks, against the Heat. You worry about things like that, but the highs are high and the lows are low. $28.9 million this year for Julius Randle. Player option next year for $30.9 million. If he does want an extension, and he does, he's probably going to try to opt out for more long-term money. Donte DiVincenzo's contract, by the way, $10.9 million this past year, and now coming into this year, it's 11.4, 11.9, and 12.5 in 2026-27. And that year, he'll be 30 years old. Mid-level exception money, beautiful contract, easily flippable if you want to. And with Julius Randle, this begs the question, all right, is Minnesota going to extend his contract, or are they going to turn around and try to flip him? Also, is he going to be healthy? He had a shoulder injury last year, ended his season, waited to get the surgery to see if he can come back and sort of play through it. Didn't work out, got the surgery late. We don't know what he's going to look like when the season starts. We have no idea at this point. We will soon, though. We will soon. The Timberwolves' best case scenario after this trade is, I mean, I don't see how it makes them a champion. I don't, but I didn't see that with Karl-Anthony Towns either. Your top 7 in Minnesota's good, like legitimately talented. And the best part of this deal for me from a Donte DiVincenzo perspective is you don't have to rely on Rob Dillingham as much. But if you're looking at their top 7, okay, so let's play it out. If Julius Randle's healthy, he starts with Rudy Gobert in the front court, Jaden McDaniels, Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Donte DiVincenzo, Naz Reid, 6 and 7. And we'll see where the rest sort of fall here. Rob Dillingham, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And I need to know that Rudy Gobert is not on the decline, which I can't say that. Rudy Gobert is making $43 million this year, has an option for $46 million the next, north of $46 million actually. That's important, right? He's gonna want an extension. He just had a bad summer for the French national team. Yes, it's not the NBA, but I would pay attention to how this potentially impacts him, because he got benched by the French national team. It was Victor Wembanyama centric. He was getting outplayed by Gershon Yabusele, Matthias Lizort. More than anything else, you want them to be, if you're a Minnesota fan, a good competitive team who can make another run in the Western Conference. But Oklahoma City, Denver, like some of these other teams are probably looking at them like, all right, like this becomes slightly easier now. It's a point that Matt Moore made when we did the Buckets episode on this. Go check that out. That's out now. Action Network, wherever you get podcasts. Buckets. And the worst case scenario is pretty disastrous. This doesn't work out. Julius Randle's not very healthy, and then Anthony Edwards has to do a lot more than you would have bargained for offensively. So good luck with that, because if this goes really south in the Western Conference, you could find yourself in some damning positions. And financially, you have the extension hanging over your head. Whether or not that's going to be something that's still on the table, and who's going to have the leverage at that point is going to be a fascinating question. With the Knicks, I mean, the best case scenario is that this is the final piece that beats the Celtics. Like, Kristaps Porzingis doesn't heal up properly, or maybe there's some other injuries, or maybe you just even beat them at full strength. Like, if you're the Knicks, this raises your ceiling, but there is a disaster scenario at play. My concerns would be the following. You're not as deep as before. Your top 7 is still really good, okay? And then Deuce McBride. Deuce McBride has to absolutely make a leap. He had nice playoff moments. He had a good playoff run. He's on an extension. So he's going to be a focal point of this rotation, of this backcourt rotation. He's going to be a guy that becomes fascinating now. They're really good on paper, but the floor is worrisome. And the disaster scenario is that they get worn down again. They get broken down again. That Jalen Brunson can't replicate what he did last year. From a health perspective, you have to worry about that because he's a small guard creating a ton of offense. Now, Karl-Anthony Towns is supposed to be a release valve. He's supposed to help with that. He's supposed to be there so that Jalen Brunson doesn't have to do everything he did last year, which was remarkable. He should not have to do that again, but we'll see. Karl-Anthony Towns has some health stuff. Over the last 5 years, he's played more than 62 games one time. Once. You could say COVID shortened seasons. Okay. In 2019-20, the team played about 66, 67 games. Because of COVID, they didn't make it into the bubble. He played 35 games that season. Just 35. The next season, 72-game season, he played 50 games. This was in 2020, 2021. 74 the next year, which is great. That was his third All-Star appearance. Way to go. 29 last year. And then this year, 62. This past season, 62. Missed 20 games. So was an all-star again, but missed the threshold in terms of awards and things of that nature. He's back with Tom Thibodeau. We'll see how that goes. But I think the upside overall for the Knicks especially, it's worth the swing. And for Minnesota, I mean, you don't want to hear, hey, now they're cutting costs after making it to the Western Conference Finals, but this is what the second apron brings. Teams are scared of this shit. Teams are scared. The Celtics are having an ownership situation that's in flux. It's quietly one of the most important stories in the NBA playing out right now. Steve Ballmer didn't necessarily go out and replace Paul George aggressively. Kind of just let him walk. Release a statement as well. The organization did. Mark Cuban hasn't told us why he left. But if you're looking at the CBA and what teams are going to be allowed to do, so to speak, in terms of moving around, like the Knicks, one, had to cash in their chips at some point, and not all risks are going to work. Maybe this will. Maybe they'll finally get back to the Eastern Conference Finals. I feel like that's what you want. You want an Eastern Conference Finals series, whether it be against the Celtics, most likely them, or Philly or anybody else. You want to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Knicks haven't done that in, I don't know, 25 years or something like that. That's what you hope if you're them. And if you're Minnesota, you're hoping that this goes better than expected. Julius Randle's a guy. We'll see if he's extension worthy and all those different things. But for Minnesota, I mean, we'll see. This is a tough one to sort of evaluate from their perspective, other than the finances. And that matters. Teams are going to be making moves because of finances. And that's another video for another day. I'd love to get into an explainer about that. I've written about this and like why the Celtics, and this was on July 1st, Action Network article I wrote about, like the Celtics ownership situation. Why are they selling now? They're not going to tell us, but look at their upcoming cap sheet. They're not going to be able to keep that team together for very long. They got their title, and it's like, all right, sell high. We're going to be seeing some weird ownership things and weird business stuff in the NBA going forward these next few years. And this is an example of Minnesota just wanting to have a cleaner cap sheet, so to speak, while staying competitive, and the Knicks being able to put in all their chips. And, you know, they don't have the daunting salary questions that other organizations do yet. So they could afford to do this. They could afford to take the risk. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll talk again very soon. Thank you for watching.